Hello.
Hello.
I've been listening to the podcast My Favorite Murder. I've been listening to it for years, but they started re-releasing their first episodes and then they're listening to it and then they're commenting on it in the present.
Yeah.
And it makes me feel really good because their audio quality was not great either.
Cool.
We are fine.
We're fine. We're gonna get better.
I really don't think people care. I think the whole thing about you need to have such a good microphone, I say as a giant plane flies overhead. Is it cutting it out? Can you hear it?
Nope, I can't hear it.
It sounds like D-Day is happening outside.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I think the whole oh, you need a good microphone and blah, blah. I feel like it's kind of just a scam to sell high quality audio equipment.
Probably,
I don't think
honestly.
listeners care.
I mean, from the feedback I got from my husband and from my sister, we definitely sound like we're in different areas.
Yeah, that makes sense because you don't have anything focusing your voice. You're
No.
the room acoustics. And I have been before too. There was that one episode where Zoom wouldn't work for me and I recorded on my phone and you can just hear the echo of my guest room.
Yeah. When we see each other again, maybe you can finagle the little microphone and play with it on my laptop for me and see. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm doing something wrong.
I mean, every single time I join this, I'm like, is it going to work? I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see where life takes us.
I'm Kayla.
And I'm Allie.
And this is Unofficial HR. Today, we're going to talk about red flags at work and in job opportunities that we've had, and sometimes just in job postings online.
And what that can potentially look like when you are looking for a job or you are in a job and you feel like you are completely stuck and don't know what to do.
Yeah. I feel like we should acknowledge up front too, obviously, clearly, unofficial HR, just because a job might have some red flags or green flags, every job is going to have both to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Even really good jobs are going to have some red flags. So
this is all just opinions.
Yes, our opinions, our experiences.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And you can see a red flag and still be like, oh, well, maybe that's not a deal breaker for me. It's just up to everyone's personal discretion. I forget what episode it was where I was like, well, how much does it pay? Because maybe I'll still take it.
Right.
And just try to stack some cash for a couple months. It depends what you're looking for.
Yes.
What do you think is the biggest red flag for you now, having had whatever previous work experience you've had? What would the biggest one be that you'd be like, oh, okay, I know this?
So this is going to be probably debatable for some people. Remember that one topic we discussed about the F word, which our F word is family in a work environment?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we're all family here. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say that is very used up, kind of like the word multitasking, It's just excessively used in the wrong way.
Yeah.
When you're going through the interview process, I'll use my most recent experience. I drove a couple states away to do onboarding and stuff. I'm thinking nothing of this. I used my personal car.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why did you have to drive states away to do onboarding for a remote job?
Because they told me they want to see me and they want me to pick up all of my equipment. And
oh, it's because they didn't want to ship it to you. They're cheap.
Yes,
that's what it was.
That's it. That's also a red flag.
Okay,
because
so many red flags.
There's a lot of red flags, but I was oblivious to that portion because I was just so excited, and I was a new baby nurse, and I was like, yeah, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. But I thought they were just trying to be friendly, but the lady on onboarding, who was a part of HR, actually the head of HR, told me, oh no, honey, you don't get any kind of reimbursement fees. This is all just for the company. We're family here.
Mm-hmm. See, and that's why I hate people exploiting the word family in a business setting, because it seems to only ever be used to take advantage of employees.
Yeah, the tit for tat thing, like, oh, well, if you drive all the way over here for us, then we'll give you some time off for your wedding kind of thing is what I was getting.
So they're bartering with you verbally instead of documenting planned
Yes.
PTO. Okay.
Yes.
That sounds like a red flag too. And actually, that's one I hadn't really thought about, like negotiating benefits verbally, not in writing, so you can't trace it back to anything. That I would say is also a red flag.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of red flags I should have been more aware of with this last job. Even when it comes to like management experience, like meetings, sometimes I'd wait 45 minutes for the person who would host a Zoom call
Oh my
to show
gosh.
up.
So just no respect for employees' time.
And then on top of it, we have X amount of calls that other people are supposed to be handling, but they're not. And then we're also getting backlash from patients because we're not answering those calls. And there's no communication. Like, if there's a big red flag, I feel like pay attention to communication skills in a work environment. Because if they do not know how to communicate and they do not speak about each other in a nice way, that's a red flag.
Yeah. If you can't communicate, like everything else is gonna suck.
So red flag from the beginning was they won't reimburse you. They're not going to reimburse you for travel fees. That's cheap and that's greedy.
And it's not like standard professional procedure. I'm not saying companies don't do it. There are a lot of companies who don't reimburse for things, but the way it should be done is you should be compensated in some way.
And like it was my fault for not even asking that during the interview process, which I should have. That is on me because I was just so excited.
I mean, I think it's great that you want to take some responsibility for that too, but I don't think you can take 100% of the responsibility for it because I would just assume if you're going to ask me to drive that far, you should be reimbursing me, or I should have the right to say, no, I'm not going to do that then.
So you have the traveling, not getting reimbursed, piss poor planning, and lack of communication. Another red flag is this position was open for over a year.
Ooh, okay. Did you ever find out why it was open for so long?
I did. They couldn't find anyone to hire like an LPN in their area because they're hurting for
Oh,
nurses.
okay.
And yeah.
I also had a position that was basically like the company couldn't find the specific kind of professional that they wanted in their area. So they made it remote. And of course, I'm all about remote jobs. So I applied for it and I got it and was then basically the only remote employee there, which then just created a weird dynamic with some of the other team members. Like, to be fair, pretty much everyone was very, very lovely. But then my boss would kind of have expectations of like, oh, well, everyone needs to come to the team events. And like he wanted everyone to be in the office a lot. And like this was a pretty decent place to work. So like they would reimburse me for travel, as you should, sometimes more than I thought was appropriate. And by that I mean I guess like they would insist like, oh, stay at this nice hotel, blah, 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 which is generous. But again, like I want a professional relationship. I don't want to be taking like nice hotel packages to then feel like I owe something more to the company, you know?
Yeah. Because it's like, what are you trying to get out of me kind of thing? Or more like, I feel like you're doing too much for me. What's the catch?
Exactly. And even if there is no catch, it's just not a good look for one employee to get to stay at these nice hotels and like fly down and stuff while all the other employees just live there.
Yeah, it feels like favoritism, right? Like, I know people compare because I've had the same issue.
And we've talked about comparing, like, even just in terms of like how you show up at work. But like, I mean, if I was someone just working in the office all day and someone who's barely ever there just flies into the state and, oh, everything is covered, I'd kind of be like, eh. And people did make comments to me, like nothing aggressive really to me. They're just kind of like, oh, that must be nice.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you want people there in person, why make the job remote? If you're going to be okay with making it remote to get the talent that you want, then you have to be okay with the other stuff that comes with it.
Yeah. And that's like the frustration with it too. I feel like, COVID kind of made the whole like remote job thing a thing to begin with.
You could do like telework jobs or like more remote style jobs back in the day. Like I knew someone who she'd been in her career for like 20 years or something by the time I met her, and she was doing remote work back in like the 90s.
Nice. Good for her.
But it was way, way, way less common. COVID made it so accessible.
Yeah. Yeah.
But job wise, like your job didn't really require you to be in person to do your job. So, like, why come in to do all your paperwork and all that stuff?
I thought the same way, but I was also just excited about the opportunity because I've never teleworked. And I thought, how great is it to be home and I can take care of my dog. I can still have a solid schedule with my husband to go and work out after work. Like it was like solid. Like it was actually a really nice job. Like working from home, 10 out of 10. I would do it all over again. I actually enjoy working at home versus working in an office full of
Oh,
other
yeah.
people because I get easily distracted. Another red flag was they were like, we would prefer if we could go back to the old days. The lady that had hired me, she's like, I just think it's better if you can just move down here and then you can just come in here like 5 days a week because, you know, we're a family and we want to get to know you. And that's part of the experience of working. And I'm just sitting in my head like, I don't want to hang out with you guys outside of work when I've already hung out with you guys 40 hours of my life in work. Is that bad?
No. Like it's one thing to make friends with coworkers and hang out with your friends who happen to be coworkers. But it's
Right.
very different to have someone be like, okay, we're all going to get together on Tuesday and you're going to fucking like it. And I used to work at a place that would do that multiple times a month for like my team. And then there would be team events for the whole team. And it was just like never ending. And I was like, I'm fucking here 40 plus hours a week.
Yep.
Why do I have to pretend to care about having snack night this night? Like, if it comes from a genuine place and your coworkers are like, hey, let's hang out, that's nice. What makes it not nice is having it be directed by your boss. They're like, oh, we need to do this. We need to all be here, blah, 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 blah.
Mandatory fun time.
Mandatory fun time. I truly don't understand like what goes through managers and CEOs' heads when they do stuff like that. I can only assume it comes from like a very selfish place of like, I want to look like I have a good company that people want to work at rather than like, oh, maybe my employee would like to go home to her daughter rather than be here an extra 2 hours tonight.
I had somebody like that. She literally kept us in the office from like 7 in the morning until 8 p.m. at night. And I would go up to her and I would just say, hey, like, can we go home? And she's like, I don't want to go home right now because I just don't want to go home to my kids and my husband. And it's like, that sounds like a personal problem.
It is, and it's sad, but you can't just force that on everybody else.
Yeah, like not only experiencing piss poor planning, the 3 Ps, but then your personal problems like PP, all these Ps. Stay away from all the Ps.
You said about the hiring manager that you thought you were talking to, that then you realized, oh, that wasn't actually the hiring manager. Like, I think people being in multiple roles that aren't assigned to them can kind of be a red flag because it shows that they're understaffed and like people are just getting asked to do a bunch of stuff that is like not their real
Yeah.
job. And you can probably expect that as well when you work there.
That was actually super insane for me because it was like, who do I need to report to? Like, honest to God. And then you have the chaos of make sure you don't talk too much to so and so. I know they're training you now, but don't tell them too much about yourself if you don't want to put yourself in a bad position. First of all, you're a manager. Second, why aren't you guys doing anything about this girl?
Yeah, and it just, to me, the red flag there is like workplace drama. Like,
Yes.
whether or not that person is an issue, the fact that somebody's like, oh, by the way, but yeah. I guess looking back, do you remember in hindsight any signs of like the poor planning, the poor communication during the interview process, or did it really only come out after you got hired and met them?
It only came out after I got hired and met them because
Mm.
the interview process in itself felt very professional for the most part. I mean, I knew about the job through extended family,
Did that
but
person work there or she just knew about it?
she worked there.
Okay.
And she told me it was like a super easy job. It was brand new. And I was like, cool, cool. Everything sounds pretty solid. And then fast forward to onboarding. I don't know what happened.
Do you think the person who referred you was like, did they just not fucking know? Or like, were you just on a completely different team that like they had no idea how bad it was? Like,
Completely different team.
oh, okay. So her experience on her team was good.
Yeah, but
That's fair.
she wanted to help me. She did not want me to work at a methadone clinic again because she knew the tragedy of that.
Yeah.
That's a red flag in itself. If you see cockroaches and a robbery actively happening next door to your work environment, those are red flags. Leave immediately. Do not, just don't even give
At what
notice.
point, though, at what point do we cross over from red flag, like warning, to full on emergency? Because
Yeah.
those are some pretty big ones.
Listen, let me tell you, I was committed to working in psych, but holy mother of shit, I
That's
don't
a
think I
lot.
could sacrifice my life that way.
Yeah, I feel like there are just some jobs that I don't know if this happens to everyone. I feel like you and I, at least at some point, ended up in a job where you're just like, holy fuck, like, what did I get myself into? For you,
Yeah.
it was an active robbery. So I will say that does take the cake.
This was not my last job, so we can be clear. This was the job before that, the one that
Yeah.
I tried out before. I was like, I need to work from home.
Yeah, fair. For me, I think some of the biggest red flags that like I now look for because of the past experiences that I had. One of them is how people carry themselves in the interview process, like the hiring
Okay.
managers. I think it's a
Yeah.
really good indicator of what you're walking into. For example, I had one hiring manager that I got the email like, oh, we're interested in interviewing you. I was like, oh my God, yes. It was like a tech company, and I was super excited to get deeper into tech.
Mm-hmm.
And we coordinated the time via email, and it ended up being like 8 in the morning because life, but hiring manager agreed to that time. And then when I had the actual call with him, he like literally answered the call and was like, I just want you to know this is like really early for me. And I remember I was apologetic. I was like, oh, sorry, like this was the only time I could make this work this week. In the back of my mind, I was like, well, you agreed to
Agree to
this,
this.
like,
Yeah.
and it kind of just set the tone for how that manager ended up being because I did get hired eventually. And yeah, he would just say stuff all the time that was kind of like low-key gaslighting, like, oh,
Yeah.
as if like I talked him into having this call time and whatever, like just this was the manager that would threaten to fire me every week as well.
Oh
So
gosh.
it was not a great working environment, but like skill wise, I did learn a lot in the time that I was there. But that's something to me that I just feel like if I'm having a call for a job and the hiring manager seems really stressed, or like I had an interview with someone who was actively answering Slack messages while she's trying to interview me.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, it's a great place to work. And oh, hold on. Oh, okay. And like it was just that the whole time. So I was like, okay, this place is fucking chaotic. They can't even give this woman 30 minutes to take a phone call. So this is not going to be a situation that I want to be in unless it pays X amount of money, which it did
So
not.
I was gonna ask question.
Yeah.
So was the money reflected of the attitude? Because I feel like that's definitely a thing, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Like, was the pay high enough to compensate for the shitty treatment?
Yes. Or for the lack of professionalism.
I would say, like, for the tech company I worked at with that first hiring manager, um, yes, and also no, because I was coming in relatively new to the industry. So I didn't know what to ask for. Like, and the place
Mm-hmm.
that I was coming from really, really lowballed everyone on salary. I had to fight so hard and have so much data to back up my performance to get a raise even remotely close to like what I felt I should be earning. And what I felt I should be earning was based on market research and industry standards that I looked up for like, oh, average salary with this many years of experience, whatever. Like, I wasn't just like, I think I need this much. I was like, here's what people typically make. Here's how many years I've been working for you. Here's literally the hundreds of thousands of dollars I made you in the last year. I think you could bump me up past 40 grand a year. And it
I
took a lot.
yep. I actually, that's another thing. Like when it came to salary with my most recent job, that was something I was very adamant on because I was like, okay, I know I got lowballed for my first ever nursing job, but I loved that job. When it came to this one, I was very much like, okay, well, in the area that we live in, and with inflation being a thing, I at least wanted to make enough money to reflect that. And in the hiring process, they're like, okay, so just so you know, and maybe a little bit of a pay cut for you, but we will go up this amount. And the reason we can't give you the full amount of what you were getting the previous job is because we have to reflect what inflation looks like for us in this state. And you're also working from home. You're not using money for gas. You're not using mileage. Like she would say things like that. Like it's very manipulative if you really think about it.
But justifying a lower salary and like,
Yeah.
okay, if you're a
Yeah.
company in Silicon Valley and your employees have to live in fucking like Palo Alto and what is it, Mountain View, California, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like one of the most expensive places you could live, then yeah, okay, maybe like the employee working remotely out of like Pennsylvania doesn't need as high of a salary as the people living there and dealing with those taxes. But I don't think just because you don't work in office is justification to really skimp on salary.
And they were throwing all kinds of merch at me. Like they made it seem like they were just top freaking notch. And then when it came to like getting my equipment and stuff,
Oh, we can't pay for shipping.
so that's why, driving all the way there and getting all that stuff. But like, there's so many red flags.
I don't remember if I fully answered your other question, the tech job that I had. So for most employees, I would say that the pay was reflective of the amount of bullshit you had to deal with. I think I could have been making significantly more money than I asked for, but because I had been used to like a lowball salary and I'm a woman, so I'm not super confident when negotiating salary.
Yeah.
I asked for what I thought was like a pretty solid salary, and at the time it was the most I'd ever made in my life, but it was definitely lower than like what I could have gotten. And I also think that's part of why they hired me. But so for me, what I was making, it was a good stepping stone, but it was not worth the level of bullshit I was putting up with. Other people who kind of knew more of the environment they were getting into, I think they got more pay and like they were like, yeah, you're gonna have to pay me more than this to put up with that amount of bullshit. And they're not wrong to do that, I don't think. Because this was like a 24/7 job, like always getting Slack messages, and certain teams were basically just never asleep. Like they were always on the hook for something, always had to be responsive. And it was just really, really chaotic. But in general, yeah, I think they paid people pretty well, but not me.
That energy from that person in the interview process, you can kind of get an idea of how much you're actually going to get paid. If it's a nonprofit job, that's something I learned. A nonprofit versus private business, like that was all new to me because I was just used to military salary. So going into that environment, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to be greedy here. I'm getting experience and they're working around my schedule.
Yeah, it depends what your goal is. If your goal is experience, then like that means a lot to eventually getting whatever
and
other job that you
accommodating
want.
for my schedule. Like that goes a long way. And for some people, they're like, no, I need to make the most money off the bat. Then you should not be going to a nonprofit organization.
Girl, some nonprofits are stacked.
Are
Like,
they?
yes, because they're nonprofit, but they are often governed by a board of private investors who are then just
Um,
shitting money into them to make themselves feel good for being rich. I've interviewed with some nonprofits that are definitely tighter budget. It's very like we're about the mission and
mhm,
doing good and all this. And I've interviewed for other ones that they still care about, doing good and, their goals, but their whole thing was also like, well, we want to do this really well. So we fund our employees and they
mhm.
paid better than some private companies that I had interviewed with.
I will say though, the whole like getting a percentage, like a raise, like a percentage and stuff like that was a thing that was real, like that was new to me and stuff. I was
That's
like, wow,
nice.
that was nice. I was
It's
like,
rare.
especially from the nonprofit place that I worked at, I was like, you know what? I'm cool with this. I feel like I'm valued. I do a decent job. Cool. Like I got used to that. That was really nice, but not every company does that.
No, a lot I don't think I've ever worked anywhere that actually you just get a standard of living
Yeah.
raise to match inflation. It's kind of always like, oh, well, your raise is based on your performance, and maybe you get enough of a raise to cover the change in standard of living. Maybe you get nothing just because they're like, oh, well, we want to see how you develop in this area more. But they can do that. Okay. Well, to wrap up red flags, I think a lot of our red flags are the same in terms of just working in a place that is some kind of organized, has some kind of forethought into how the company operates, type of thing.
I can give you extremes. Extreme one. If there's robberies next door, run. If
Yeah.
there's roaches, run. If your manager is getting arrested and nobody told you, and then you found out the night of,
Mm,
run. Do your
so much
2 week
drama.
notice.
Yeah. And if you're looking for red flags during the job interview process or like the job hunt, that's one thing. Like you can make a decision if you're going to actually join a company or not. If you're already working somewhere and you're picking up on a lot of red flags, I feel like information like this would have been helpful to me in some of my past roles because it
Mhm.
would have helped me stop second guessing myself so much,
Yep.
especially when you are just out of school or you are changing industries. I feel like a lot of it is like, oh, this must just be how it is in this work
Yeah.
world. And it's usually not. It's usually that it's a shitty company.
Yeah. So I guess on that note, then, I guess it's time to end with a positive.
Yes. What's your positive?
My positive is after 5 months of long, hard work and trials and tribulations, your girl got hired.
Woo! I'm so excited for you.
That was just a lengthy process of, onboarding and stuff and getting all my credentials cleared.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I'm so happy for you and so proud of you. And I think you're just a really good example and like a hopeful example of what the job market can be like. Like there are jobs out there. It is possible to get a job because sometimes it really like, I mean, we've talked about the whole mental health aspects of looking for a job. It can be so demoralizing. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really happy to see you one leave a job that like wasn't treating you well, that you weren't happy in, that was causing like issues for you, and just be like, you know what? I don't know what's next, but I'm gonna just take some time and see what happens. And then you did go through the whole job hunting process and you put in a ton of work to try to find the right position and then to like get a job offer and get hired. Like that's super exciting.
Yeah, and I think it's just, being more thoughtful and like even throughout this whole podcast experience, just I feel like my level of mindfulness and just even having opportunities to vent about the whole job hunting experience has been very rewarding for me and also therapeutic for me as well. You're my unofficial therapist and my unofficial wife, and I appreciate you going through this whole process with me. There is hope out there. Do what fits your needs at the end of the day. That's the best advice I can give anybody. Any unofficial advice to anyone is just either take your time or do what my unofficial wife does and just fucking swipe all the way until you find the right fit. Whatever works for you.
Yes. I forget though, what ultimately ended up resulting in a job offer for you? Because it wasn't like you were browsing on LinkedIn or something, right? Like what contact method allowed you to eventually get a job offer?
It was kind of multiple things that kind of aligned into one. It was definitely me being active and going and participating in both the in-person job fairs as well as the online job fairs, and then finding a commonality between the two. In person wise, I benefited from just marketing myself and finding people to speak with about my situation who had helped me, kind of guided me to like, hey, you want to go this way? This is probably the path you should probably take because you have all these credentials, but you still need to work on X, Y, and Z. So that was helpful. And then to go online and see that same exact job for a job fair and then get in contact with the recruiter for that job, super helpful as well. Perfect. And just being open-minded to what other people have to say to you. I feel like, I don't know, for me as a veteran, hearing other veterans speak to me and trying to guide me in that way, that level of trust is definitely there because at the end of the day, we're trying to help each other. So I don't know, from that perspective, from my own personal life, like I'm so thankful for my vets and active duty members. Like it's a whole different experience. And I love that support system that I have. So yeah.
So anything that we said about in-person or virtual job fairs not being super effective, you can take that with a grain of salt because they did result in something.
You can do both. Try both. Be open-minded.
And it sounds like just networking with people who have insights into whatever you want to do or can at least point you in the right direction. Like
the networking helped. And then it led me to the internet job fair that led me to now the position that I will be working at. Like very full circle. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful for people to know.
My process is very lengthy. It wasn't just like, yeah, I went to this job fair, talked to these people, and then I went to this online job fair, and then boom. Like, I had to sit there and think about what am I trying to accomplish? What goal am I trying to achieve? Especially if you're just somebody who's not knowing what the next steps are. It's okay to express that. It's okay to go with friends to job fairs and seeing what opportunities are there. Do your research before you go to those places. Or you know what? Even when you're there, just be honest. Be like, hey, I'm here just to support my friend. But what kind of job can you help me out? Because I was honestly just like that at my interview.
And I think you were also just like, you were very patient. It wasn't like it happened overnight. I think even when you heard about a potential job opening, you still couldn't apply right away. Like you did have to wait a while for even the application to be available to apply to. So for anyone who is like listening to this and thinks that like, oh, you just got lucky or something, like it was a lot of work, it was a lot of patience. I think it's really easy to look at someone else's experience and be like, oh, well, that's nice for them, but that wouldn't happen for me. But I mean, it was a really deliberate process for you.
And it was a very honest conversation to have with myself and also with my spouse as well, and say, hey, how do you feel about me just waiting out and seeing if this if they do reach out to me or I reach out to them at this time when that job does open? And he was for it, I was for it. There was only green flags with like communication from this company. They sent me an email 2 days before the position actually opened up. And I was honest to God shocked by that because you barely in this like time get an email from any application from people, let alone applying for something. So
yeah. Very happy for you. Formal congratulations on the podcast.
It's all coming full circle. It was a very lengthy process, 4 to 5 months, but we got there.
Yes.
All right, friend.
All right. Bye, friend.
Bye.